Some artists paint nature. Some paint detailed snapshots of life with people as their subject matter, and I paint garbage. More specifically, the chaotic scenes of construction sites, but also literal garbage cans from the places that I travel to. The obsession has reached a point where on each trip that I go to, my camera roll ends up looking like this. The most chaotic one of them all was my trip to Berlin, so that's what we're taking as inspiration today. I'll be walking you through the process of making a sketchbook out of scrap pieces of paper and then showing you a tour of it all filled out. This gives us a perfect moment to whip up my paper hoarding folder, where I've been storing all of the random bits of packaging material, old invitations, diplomas, and so on. The plan is to use this waste material to make an A4 sketchbook out of it, and then document all of that city chaos inside. This way the tool itself matches the energy and the atmosphere of the work within it. I sorted it to keep a more or less neutral color palette, which could work with my inspiration images, and started folding each paper in half. This is done to later stack them into signatures, which are basically stacks of nested folded papers. If you look at any book that you have, you'll see that it is not made in a way where all of the layers of paper are just folded in half in one stack. The book is made up of multiple smaller stacks, which helps distribute the paper evenly. These small stacks is what signatures are. In my case, each signature is made out of 7 pieces of paper, big or small, doesn't matter, which I'm now stitching down the middle. So here are all of my singles after I've stitched them, and you can tell definitely that I was super wonky in some of those, but that doesn't really matter because we're going to hand stitch them together in between each other anyway. So I'm going to be actually going through the spine of this single instead of through the stitching that is super out of center. To connect them, I wanted to introduce a little bit of regularity and balance amidst all of this chaos, so I marked even distances on the spine of the future sketchbook to connect the signatures together by hand. This is an example of a different sketchbook that I made once, but to help make the stitching more simple and even, you can gently carve out these lines we just marked with a handsaw. For this chaotic sketchbook I didn't do that, but generally it's quite helpful. Then I just followed the guidelines of my markings, going through each signature and catching the one below it with my thick wax thread. Now the fun part begins, making the cover. I had just one inspiration image for the cover, which was this soul wall that we passed in Berlin. It had everything: an overdose of different colors and text, torn up posters glued on top of the remains of the older one, sharp metal wire on top, little bits of graffiti peeking out, some 3D elements from the poster drapery, and just pure gorgeousness. I used museum booklets to make my posters. Tore them up, crumpled, made some parts stick out, wet them with my random children's watercolor that I found at home to make this kind of dirty effect, crumpled them, and added a Berlin graffiti style text over top. My favorite part is this pokey wire illusion on the spine of the sketchbook, which references the original photo, albeit indirectly. Obviously it's not pokey and sharp. And now that the tool is all ready, we can get into the chaos that's inside. This page is dedicated to Berlin Art Gallery, Berlinische Kunstgalerie I think is the name, specifically for this sculpture. It was a moving piece, imagine a man on a horse which was intact, and then slowly on a time lapse you can see how it is falling apart into pieces. The same sculpture was actually on a giraffe, so that's why I doubled it here and added on a piece of acetate, which I believe was some kind of packaging box of kids' toys that I was using to make a cake. Entry tickets and a receipt. I love those German receipts, they are such a beautiful off blue-gray color. I absolutely love the stone. Here, this was pretty much the first picture I think I took in Berlin when we arrived on the train station, and there was a bicycle on the bridge, and I wanted to depict that because it was kind of grayish, cloudy. I wanted to give this murky, cloudy feeling. It was on the 30th of June, Washington Platz, so in the Washington Square. I absolutely love street signs that are littered with additional stickers or spray paint or anything on top of them, and I love the chaos of that. I'll insert a picture here of what the original one looked like. I think this is very reminiscent of my Italian trip. If you feel like it afterwards, you can check out the Italian Zine video. I'll link it here and in the description below, because that whole initial inspiration page on the cover is pretty much this. In here, pretty much the whole page is kind of just snippets of my boyfriend. I like portraiture. I like this specific style of doing portraits. A lot of it is very like heavy brush strokes, kind of aggressive color, primary colors predominantly. So I just put a earring on him. I liked the style. I like that this was the focal point, kind of like a girl with a pearl earring, but in my case, male version. And then on the right is that specific earring. Played shuffleboard, never had it before, so I just added the logo that was there, added the rules from the shuffleboard, and that's the whole page. My boyfriend is German, so he was obviously very excited to have kebab, so that's exactly what we had. And then just some random pictures of the trip itself. It was that actual picture which I used as a reference point when drawing him with a pearl earring, so I just cut it out and left the outline there. And here you can see the piece is cut off, because I was painting deliberately over top of the first few pages. So I like how first you get rid of the head, then you get rid of the glasses, and then that's all that is left there. On this page, I mean, this one is blank. I wanted to keep a little bit of breathing room because I'll explain what this thing is, but for that you need to first see the image on the right. I love chaos of the streets. This is no surprise. I think maybe if you've seen any of my content recently, then it's very much represented. I love the chaos of the streets, and I think Berlin is such an amazing example of that. So I really wanted to, again, use my favorite color palette of primary colors and showcase one of the many, many pictures that I took from that trip. Here are just some examples of those beautiful, chaotic streets that are constantly in construction, constantly spray painted, dirty and fallen on the floor with some dirt and grass and mud and whatever. Absolutely in love with that. And with this specific image, I was playing with composition. In what way? I traced those main lines of composition. So if you can see with this tape over here, it is basically repeating the same lines that we see on the background. So this line, the big one, is repeating this composition, this straight line. This line is just outlining what we see from the fence going and whatever. So all those lines are like it. At first I did them in black marker, didn't like it, put tape over it. And then the same exact composition of that black line I used to cut my Polaroid images. There were 4 or 5 different photos that I just cut up in the exact same pattern and just reassembled them together from different pieces. Because the photos themselves were pretty boring. I took them on my first year of university. So that must have been 2017, I think, or 2018. So I had happy time cutting them up. This is one of my favorite pages. No surprise, Berlin is one of the creative cities that has a lot of street art. This was one of the few pages where green actually made an appearance, and I just didn't want to change any of the colors that the artist on the street actually used it. I fully one-to-one replicated as close as I could with acrylic paint and markers and pencils and whatever else. One of my favorite pages. This was a way for me to test out my new watercolor pencils. My best friend gifted them to me for my 25th birthday, so that was the first time I was actually playing with them. And on the right is the image that I was using for that particular purpose, so I was trying to kind of copy it. I think composition could have been a bit better because some of the things are not entirely in the position where they're supposed to be. For example, her arm is kind of close to the pole and covering it partially, and in my case, she's quite far away. So if I were to repeat it and actually try to do it one-to-one, which I was attempting to do here, I would have to move some things left and right. But overall, I'm quite happy. It was one of the rare occasions when I was actually drawing with colorful pencils and also on top of non-white paper. This is something I want to play with more. The beige craft paper, it is offering a very nice canvas because this way I didn't really need to play with her skin tone that much. I didn't need to change her skin tone that much because that already gave me a little bit of a basis. And then bringing out those light and white and bright yellow colors was a lot easier because everything else already kind of established a little bit of a language. Now here, again, another example of chaotic Berlin. I am in love with the garbage cans of Berlin. I know this is a bit specific, but this is my fetish nowadays, it seems. So on the right, I just painted one of the million images of garbage cans that I took. Added all the dirt, added all the like nastiness of it, the stickers, the dripping paint, and I tried to use techniques and mediums that would reflect the same vibe, the same feeling. For example, this was spray paint. Of course, I could have used spray paint, which I don't have, and it would have been pretty challenging to make the lines pretty thin. I ended up using oil pastels to kind of drag that paint over top of my dried acrylic, which created this uneven texture, which was kind of similar to what spray paint looked like on that image if you look here. So I like also chaotic background. It was pretty much just me using up my dirty palettes all throughout the sketchbook when I was painting something else, and then that offered also a pretty nice chaotic background here. This section, you can see it's a little bit of a sneak peek in the future projects, which is going to be a ginormous canvas, again inspired by Berlin, working through different textures, different skills, different techniques. And then on this side, it is me repeating the word that is actually written here, and maybe faint lines, but it actually adds, this is an N-E-R for any of the German speakers. As far as I understand, this means cigarette butt butler. German trash cans are kind of funny. There are a lot of different random funny words written on them, and this one specifically has a bow tie, so it's a very classy one, despite how chaotic it looks. And then we get into one of my favorite pages of pure madness and chaos. I wanted to use a jelly plate. If you've seen on TikTok, I was randomly served this video of a girl using a gelatin plate, which you transfer an image to. You can use a printed out image on top of it, peel it off, and supposedly the area that has ink will be peeling off the paint. So the leftover stuff you will be filling in with another layer of paint and then printing with. I tried multiple times, wasn't super successful. So these are the images that I initially tried. They didn't really transfer, so it was not going well. And then I tried to play with a printer. It decided to eat up my paper, so I had to pull it out, but I absolutely love the chaos again, so it's adding to it. This image kind of transferred. It's sort of successful if you know what the reference image is, which is this. Kind of a set of tables that were flipped upside down whenever the bar closed or a restaurant closed and wasn't yet open. I like it. Definitely a lot more to play because my jelly plate was a bit grainy. Gelatin didn't fully dissolve. If you can see those little dots everywhere that are missing, it's not because of the image transfer specifically. I mean, apart from these big blobs, because I was a bit too impatient and I pulled it off. And I'm not really sure what exactly I did wrong, because according to the recipe of that jelly plate, I should have worked pretty fast and I already let it too much time, but it was still grainy. So maybe I didn't heat it up enough, but we'll definitely be trying that again because the technique is very cool. It's super impressive. For sure deserves a redo. Here I wanted to work with fonts. I'm not a graphic designer, so definitely don't come for me in terms of advice or planning how to do it. I just saw a bunch of beautiful promotional things. So I wanted to use that information. So in here, this beautiful blue, interesting, unique curly font, I repeated here specifically this title and then used it up in further pages of the sketchbook you'll see. And this one was just similarly, again, another iteration of my Berlin Chaos in the same color palettes that I enjoy. This section specifically is super satisfying because the silvery paint is so three-dimensional. I laid it out super thick and it's very satisfying to touch. Now here's where we get into those fonts. I loved how this garbage can was spray painted. I still really dream about making a bag which has the same technique over top of it, which is spray paint, but then the hinge itself is also spray painted and whatever you see underneath it, it's the same shape. So at some point they line up perfectly. I really like it. I mean, I have to just think about what kind of word would I want to create on my bag. And here would be theoretically the alphabet that I would try to play with. And also technique-wise, I've never spray painted. I really want to, but I have a feeling that spray paint is actually drying pretty hard on fabric. So if I wanted to make a bag out of it, I would have to figure out a medium that would make it stay there and not crack. Because I remember my group mate from university, she used spray paint on jersey and that stiffened it, but could be something interesting. We'll have to try. Now here is the inspiration image for the actual cover of my sketchbook. I like the sharp wire over top of it, which this specific sketchbook, I also tried to repeat the wire over here, which is obviously not sharp and obviously not wire, but the effect is still there. So I really like that section of it. Here we get into another alphabet. Love the amount of layers that it has because it feels so flat and three-dimensional at the same time. So I used up different fonts that I saw here. This blue font was coming from this specific spray painting job, and then this was just a repetition, although not sure what this exactly says. I just tried to write Berlin. And I like the combination of L and I because this is technically an L, but then it's also acting as an I with a little dot over top of it. Maybe confusing to read, but I like it anyway. Here kind of created a font, but the way I was working through it is kind of just roughly sketching a typical alphabet and a number sequence. Over top of it, trying to kind of block out how these letters looked like from the specific sketch, and then over top of it sketching or like blocking in what the font would actually appear as if I were to digitize it. I like this effect when you put the things offset because it reminds me of, again, the amount of layers that go in here. So this is just a fun optical, not even illusion, but like an optical vision of it. Another spray paint. I love that the spray paint itself got a little bit of additional information. Someone else came and spray painted. So in this iteration, created an alphabet of this like fake extra layer of spray paint in pink, a lot of over top sketching and so on, and I love this alphabet overall. Like it would be cool to digitize it and scan it and actually use it in some fonts. And then over top, not every letter, but some of the letters that I saw here, so C, H, and B, they were already existing, them I sketched in, and then did a couple of those letters that I thought would be kind of interesting. If I were to develop it further, the whole font could exist like that, but for some reason, like I love the satisfying feeling of not everything being completed, and I feel like that kind of adds to the feeling of the whole sketchbook and to the mood of Berlin overall. And also, if I were to digitize it, what I would do, I would make the pink font, I would make the black and pink mixed font, and I would also then completely finish the whole black font and then scan it in the color of that pink peeking through. So if you imagine, let's say the Q, I would erase the pink stuff that goes around the Q, but I would keep the pink that is inside the lines of the black. I feel like that could be a cool font as well. This is, yeah, kind of maybe the least sophisticated of all of those font attempts, but these are a couple of trash cans I also sketched out and then used the inspiration from those letters in here. Not a huge fan. I think the only ones I actually like are the M, the J, which is, well, this, I assume that it's a J, but it could be any other letter, to be honest. I don't know. Not my favorite, but was worth a try. The holy, glorious page of garbage cans. I don't know if there's anyone else in the world who loves Berlin trash cans as much as I do, but I'm in love. I think they give me the same satisfaction as the street signs did in Rome when I was taking pictures of them maybe 3 years ago or 4 years ago whenever we had a friend trip. So again, video up on the channel if you want to watch. But I love the interaction of it. I love how this is a static placement of a garbage can, which is not going to go anywhere. The whole point of it is to be there always for you reliably to throw stuff in. And then how chaotically people interact with them. They make them dynamic. They make me feel like the garbage cans move and travel and have some sort of life outside of their placement. I don't know. And ironically, we went to an art gallery after I started taking all of those pictures. And then in an art gallery, there was a garbage can. So I'm not the only person who actually enjoys them, but I don't know. If you look at these pictures, which one is your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. This leaves us with another set of blank pages. There are too many of them for me to squeeze in additional information without having gone to Berlin again. We need to have a part 2 of Berlin. We need another set of inspirations from the trips. So absolutely not the last time that I'm going to that city. So I'm thinking from my future trips, I will first of all, fill in these gaps, fill in these gaps, and then perhaps do a whole spread of this guy, just paint it like the entire page, the entire opening. But that will have to wait additional inspiration. So until then, this is my Berlin sketchbook. Thank you for watching.